I'm sure most of you now know what routers are and then why we need them. So I will need like two people to just give me like a few explanation from what they understand about route routers, and then we are going to proceed.
Good morning, guys.
Yo, good morning, Tali.
So, according to what I understand about React Router, like it helps you to navigate between pages. Um, let's say you have multiple page in your browser. Instead of the browser sending a request to the server to fetch those pages, you can handle everything on the front end with React. Yeah, that's what I understand.
Nice. That's like a simplistic overview and the basic explanation of what a router is. So let's hear from the next person.
Okay, good morning, guys. Um, Router is just like in our normal HTML when we use our anchor tag to navigate to multiple pages. The router here in React helps us to do that, and it helps us to do it very, very fast with React. And then from the last class, what we were able to understand was that he used link and then nav link for the routing, in which the difference he gave us an explicit difference between the link and the nav link, in which the link can navigate you to other pages, and the nav link, as the name implies, will navigate you within your nav bar, and then it has an additional advantage of coming with a default active state. So like the colors and other stuff. So that was what we learned in the other class. Thank you.
Okay, good explanations. Shows that you guys are you know your stuff, and then we can proceed with React. So I just need someone to just give me what's the difference between because Jethro made mention of nav. I said nav. He made mention of anchor tags in our normal HTML and CSS that we use for routing, right? So what's like the difference between the routing in React and then the other routing in HTML and CSS? So let's just spot it out.
Um, I think routing in HTML and CSS, like the anchor tag, has to do with sending a request to the server using an anchor tag. You have to send a request to the server and then fetch the page in which this is being linked to the anchor tag. But then in routing, using link or nav link, which is basically the same thing, just that nav link has an added functionality of the class with active. Understand? So instead of sending a request to the server, the nav link or the link check between the React server there, the React routing there, and get the page and immediately renders that page. Instead of letting the request to reach the server, it just handles it in between the React server there. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I understand. So the anchor
Okay,
tag
okay,
actually
okay.
sends request to the server, while the nav link doesn't get to the server. It just handles it on the React router.
Hmm, interesting. Yeah, it will be. Let's hear from you, my boss.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm trying to point out some things with regards to what Mr. Tade said. If you're making use of that anchor tag and the href, it does not make a request to the server. If you are building an application with React, it does not make sense to start. Only if you connect your back end to your front end, that's only where make sense to server. But now, stage people are now, nothing concerns the server with React now, or with HTML and CS and CSS now. So now different between href, sorry, href and a React router is just that if you use a href, the page has to load. Why a React router, the page don't have to load. That is the difference between both of them. Because React is single page application. Do you get that difference between both of them? Thank you.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense, my boss. Yeah, Ruben, let's also hear from you.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning, Ruben.
In the React routing, right?
Yeah,
It just like this thing handles the this thing side, client side. Then the HTML handles the server side.
okay. Yeah, so I think you're saying the same thing with Tally, and that's what Ebube just mentioned now. But then you are right. It handles the client side rendering. That's for React, right? But then on the other hand, it doesn't necessarily mean that HTML and CSS must always hit the server. But yeah, I think it does that most of the time. Uh, who just raised their hands now?
I think it's Chuku Obed. Obed wants to say something.
Okay. I think he has changed his mind. All right, so great observations from everyone. It shows that you guys have been studying and been doing your stuff, and then it makes a lot of sense. So from what you explained, React Router is just what it is, not far-fetched. So let's have a look for the order of what we have today. So in the course of this class today, we are just going to uh, do React routing again, just as a refresher, and then we are going to introduce custom hooks. So I think in the last class, I introduced hooks, right? How many of you can remember? Okay. Yeah. But then the hooks I introduced are inbuilt hooks given to you by React. But then today, I want to introduce custom hooks that you yourself can be able to create. So you can be able to write your own custom hooks in React, and then the page is going to handle it for you. But then before then, let's still buttress on router and then the React router. And then let's see its potential and then what it has to offer. So I don't know if you guys tried out any hands-on in the last class. Did you? Or was it just explained theoretically?
No hands on, although he was the one that was doing all this stuff, so we didn't get to try anything on our own.
Okay, like you guys didn't try anything on your own, but he showed it from his laptop, right?
Yeah, sure, he did.
All right, cool.
He created an about, contact, and homepage, and then he showed us how we can navigate through using the link and then the nav link, and then he did both nested routing.
Nested routes, yeah. Okay, so I think he has covered like bulk of the stuff, and then there won't be any need having to go over React router again, so we can just head over straight to hooks. But then the most important thing is for you to try this thing out yourself, and then you understand how it works much more better. But then theoretically, the concept, I am convinced that you guys understand it, right? So let's just head over to hooks, and then we are good to go. So just give me a moment. Let me share my screen, and then All right, can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so straight at it, React hooks. I say hooks were added to React in version 16.8. Simply put, there wasn't hooks before. Hooks allow function components to have access to state and other React features. Because of this, class components are generally no longer needed. So that's why hooks were introduced. And then in the last class, I could remember that I wanted to start introducing hooks, but I couldn't simply because I had to go in depth to explain components, right? So today, I won't ask if anyone knows components. I'm 100% sure I have taught components and you guys have tried it out. So although hooks generally replace class components, there are no plans to remove classes from React. So we can still declare class-based components, right? But then hooks help functional components to access states and other React features. Okay, so what's a hook? Hook allows us to hook into React features such as state and lifecycle methods. I've explained this the last time, and then we made use of the useState, where we try to build a counter app that the useState takes notes of the counter every time a button is clicked, and then it keeps incrementing it using the useState hook. And we are keeping the state of the count, right? If you all can remember. So I can remember we tried out the useState, and then we wanted to try out the useEffect, but then we didn't. Right? So so what does useEffect do? So the useEffect hook allows us to perform side effects in our components. So like I told you guys the last time, the useState always waits for an interaction, that is either the clicking of the button or something at all that is going to make the state to change. But then the effect works with a particular effect within the page, like the name implies. So probably you can tie your useEffect hook to a state variable or to a function. And then anytime that function changes or anytime that state variable changes, your useEffect is going to run, right? So useEffect doesn't necessarily need a human interaction or anything at all to make it work. All you just need is to track a particular item or variable within your React app, and then it's going to always perform the action with the dependency array. And then we explain these two things and say this is how a useEffect looks like. So a useEffect accepts two arguments. The second argument is optional. That is the dependency array. But then the first argument is the function that is going to get run in the effect. And then, like we all know, the useEffect hook runs once as soon as you load the web page. It's going to run the first time. And then it's going to run subsequently based on this dependency array. So the dependency array is just a simple array that contains like all the items or all the variables or all the certain effects that you want. If they have a certain change, the useEffect should run. So that's just what is in the dependency array. So let's look at the two simple example that was explained here. So this is a simple example of a useEffect hook, but this useEffect hook doesn't have a dependency array because it's supposed to be specified here. Yeah, and then what this works is that it has a set timeout that sets the count, and then it sets the count plus one after 1 second, right? That's what the useEffect hook does. So let's also look at another useEffect that doesn't have a dependency array. Sorry, the one with a dependency array. We just saw a useEffect without one. All right, so this is a simple example of one, but then properly explained here. this is a use effect with a dependency array. So the dependency array, you signify it here as array, and then you insert anything that you want to track within that array. So what is happening here? Like take for example, in this case, we are using count as a dependency within this use effect. So what is count in this case? Count is a state variable that stores the current state of the count. So it starts at 0, and then every time a user clicks a button, it increments the count. Now, what happens here is, if count is part of the dependency array, anytime the count changes, this use effect is going to run. And then if this use effect run, what is in the use effect hook? The set calculation function. And then set calculation function, what does set calculation function does? So it just sets calculation. And then calculation is count times 2. So anytime this use effect runs, it's going to do count multiplied by 2. So in this case, what is count? Count is 0, right? And then the first time the page loads, it will do set calculation and do count times 2. So 0 multiplied by 2 is what? 1, right? So it sets the calculation to 1. And then waits for the count to change. So anytime a user clicks this button, and then the count changes, this use effect is going to run. Once this count changes from maybe let's say 0 to 1, this use effect is going to run. And then the use effect is going to perform the calculation, which is going to say count multiplied by 2. So in this case, count is 0, right? And then you click it, count incremented by 1. It's going to say count, which is 1 times 2. And then it's going to set calculation as 2, like that. And it keeps going. So anytime a user clicks a button and then count is set, this use effect is going to run. This is just what a use effect with a dependency array works. So someone is raising up their hands or so. I think I heard a sound.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool, Rufai. Proceed.
Yeah, can you please recap about the set calculation now again, please?
All right, cool. So here is it. I explained the concept of a use effect hook. And I told you it's a hook that accepts 2 parameters. The first one is a function. That is the function you want it to run every time the use effect is called, right? And then the use effect is called based on this dependency array. So on default, when you load your web page, the use effect is going to run the first time. That's how it is designed to be. But then it's not going to run again, except anything that is specified within the dependency array changes. That is when the use effect is going to run. So in this case, where we made use of set count, let me explain the second one. Where we made use of this use effect with set calculation, we have 2 state variables that were declared. First is the count, and it was set to 0. And then next is the calculation, and then the calculation was also set to 0. Now, in the use effect hook, remember, it runs once as soon as you log into the page. So as soon as we log into this counter functional component, what is going to happen is that this use effect is going to run. And then what is this use effect doing? It is setting calculation. Can you see this set calculation function? So you already know how useState works, right? This first variable is like the main state. Then this is the function that updates the state. So in this case, the state is 0. Anytime we call set calculation and passing a variable into it, it's going to set the current state of the calculation to anything that we pass inside of this function. Now look at this closely. In this set calculation, we are performing a function. And then what the function does is that this function takes the current count and multiplies it by 2. Now remember, the use effect runs only once if there's no dependency array. So if you load the page, is to run only once the first time. So as soon as you come into this page, the use effect will run, and then to try to set calculation. So if the use effect run, set calculation is going to look for count. And then what is count in this case? Count is what? Count is 0. So as count is 0, it's going to say 0 multiplied by 2. So 0 multiplied by 2 is what? Let me see the mathematicians in the house.
That's 0.
0.
Hey, how?
0 multiplied by 2 is 0.
No. Maybe it's my mathematics that is wrong. You guys should think again. 0 multiplied by 2. Don't check
Anything
your
multiplied
calculators.
by 0, sir.
Okay.
Multiplied by 0 na 0 now.
Okay. So 0 multiplied by 2 is 0. So in this case, it's going to set calculation to what? 0. So that's just like still saying useState 0. So it's still going to be 0 in this case. Now, this use effect is not going to run again because it has run the first time. But then look at this. It is taking note of this count in the dependency array. And like I explained for you guys, anything we add into the dependency array, the use effect is always going to be looking out for that thing. Anytime the thing changes, it's going to run that use effect. So in this case, our use effect is going to be looking at count. So anytime count changes, let's say, for example, count changes from 0 to 1, our use effect is going to run again and then run this set calculation. So in this case, what is going to make count change? It is only on click of this button, as you can see here. If you click this button, it sets count to C, which is the current state of count plus 1, right? And then in this case, it's going to say 1. So this case, count is going to change from 0 to 1. And if it's changed from 0 to 1, use effect is going to run. And if use effect runs, use effect is going to set calculation to count times 2. So this time around, use effect is going to say count. And then this time, remember, count has changed. So count is 1, right? And then it's going to run 1 times 2. This time around, what's the answer? 2, right? Then it's going to set this calculation to 2. And then wait for this button to get clicked again. So if this button gets clicked again, it's going to automatically change the state of count. So count in this case is going to be 2, right? As soon as it changes to 2, the use effect notice that count has changed. Count is no longer 1, count is 2. That means I am supposed to run the use effect. Then it's going to run the use effect again. And then the use effect is going to set calculation. This time around, count is 2. And then it's going to do 2 times 2, which is what? 4. As soon as it changes to 4, it's going to set calculation to 4. So in this case, count is 2, calculation is 4. Like that, and it keeps going. So we are going to try this out shortly and then see how this works. But then, Rufai, I hope you understand the theoretical explanation of what I just said.
Yes, sir.
All right. But have you guys tried use effects before? Oh, okay. So a lot of people have tried use effects, or just one person. Who else? So that I will know if I will do this or not. If you haven't tried use effect, or if you want us to try use effect properly, just raise up your hands. Let me see. Let's see number. All right. So let's head over and look at use effect properly. Okay, so in the last class, I think I made use of a particular project I spin up a React app, but I really can't remember. It should be in learning, right? Mm. Okay, yeah, learning React. Yep. So I think we tried out the use effects, but then we didn't finish it up. Yeah, so this is it. I just introduced it the last time. So we are going to do it properly now, and then we understand how it works. So how do I start on my React project? Somebody should help me out. Remember, it's React with Bytes, right? So somebody should help me out. What's the code? What's the command?
npm run dev.
npm run dev. Let's see whether this works. What's happening? So don't worry, you are correct. It's just a problem from my side. My laptop always wants me to make use of sudo, but then your laptop is going to work, right? But then in mine is not going to work. So it's saying here that our app is open on localhost 517. So let's try it out. Yeah, and then we did this the last class. So what's going to happen is let's try the use effects now. So useState first. Let me try and see if this changes. So it's incrementing, and then here is incrementing by 2, right? All right. So we are good to go. Let me just take this out so that it will just be 1. Perfect. All right. So the same way they made use of counts, remember we have, but this time around we have number, right? So let's do a use effect and then see what that use effect does for us. Okay. So first and foremost, what is going to happen is I'm going to set a new variable called calculation. Same way they did here. Same way they did here. I'm going to set it up. So let me just copy and then paste this guy. And then what will happen is I want to display this on the front end. So let me just do this. Oh, so sorry. Yeah, sure. How about now? Can you see?
Yeah, it's okay.
Great. All right, so let me just try to display this in the front end. Wait, what should I do this? Let's say in H4. And then let me change the text. I want it to be very large. Let's say 3XL and then fonts bold. Let's make it bold so that everyone can see this clearly. And then in this case, we are going to display what now? Calculation, right? So let's see what this looks like. Yeah, so this is it. It's actually displaying here. Let me fix this properly. Yeah, much more better. And then bring this to the center. Uh-oh. How did I? My styling, his screen wistful. I think the problem should be from this modal guy. Okay. Let me change it to a flex call. Perfect. But then it's way at the bottom. And I don't want that. So let's bring it to the top a little. Then I'll just say empty 100 px and see. Oh,
Use MB, not MT. Margin bottom.
oh, nice. So you guys are writing Tailwind. I see. It's good that you are debugging my code. Okay. So this is me displaying calculation, and then in this case, calculation is what? Calculation is 0, right? Hello, please. Who's that? All right. So let's try out the first method that they use for the use effect. So as you can see, this is the use effect hook. This is what it looks like. First and foremost, not far-fetched from what we have. Can you see the two different parameters I have, right? First and foremost, this is what? This is a function, right? And then this is the dependency array. So leaving the dependency array is the same thing as not putting anything in a dependency array. So this is a function that handles the use effects, and then I can be able to try this out. So let's get to it. So in this case, I want to run set calculation. And then in this case, what they said we should do there is to do count or number, in our case, number times 2. Yeah. So set calculation, we are saying is going to be number times what? Number times 2. And in this case, number is 15 because we set the state to 15. So let's see what this is going to look like when we first load this page. And then remember, set calculation is 0 here, right? So in our page, it was showing 0. But let's see what this will look like in our web page. What do we have here? Hello, guys.
Yeah, it has doubled the calculation.
Why?
Number is 15.
The number is
It's
15,
setting
yeah,
number to
and
15
the set number is
instead
2.
of 0.
So 15 times 2, that's 30.
One at a time, one person.
Okay.
Who are we
I
starting?
said
Yeah.
the number is 15. So, and you said the count to multiply it by 2. So 15 times 2 is going to give us 30.
Okay. But I'm really interested. You haven't hit the nail on the head. I want to know why it showed us stats in the first place.
Sir?
I want to know why it showed us stats in the first place.
Yeah, I think I said it now. I said the count multiplied.
Yeah, you are correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you are correct. You are correct. My only problem is that you haven't hit the nail on. There's something I want to hear. I didn't hear it. So in this case, calculation is 0. But then as soon as we load the page, it takes calculation to be 30. Why? Just one straightforward talk. Don't think too far, and don't think too close, and don't think too much. And with this, I've confused you because everybody's thinking too far now because I say don't think too far.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can, Chukwubed.
Okay, I think inside the use effect, we already set count to ×2. So on the first page load, the use effect will run without clicking the button. I think
Perfect, Chukwu. Like that's what I want to hear. The calculation is correct. Everything that Rufai mentioned is right? But then what I really want to hear is that the use effect runs the first time I load the page. That's why I did that calculation and changed it for me to 30. And then taking the current state of count and then changing it for me to 30. But on this page now, did it change again? Anytime we go to this page, it still persists as 30. So how can we make this change now? So let's do it this way that they work. So there's no dependency array in this use effect. That's what I want you to understand now. There's no dependency array. So as there's no dependency array, it's going to run only once. There's a dependency array, but it's empty. So it's as good as saying there's no dependency array. So with this, the use effect will run only once. And once it runs once on page load, it's not going to work again. But then what happens to dependency array if I set it? Maybe I try to track a particular variable in the dependency array. Now watch out. I have a variable called number, right? So if I set this number as my dependency array, anytime that number changes, it is always going to be running this use effect hook for me. Now let's look at the simple explanation. This time around, number is not inside of the dependency array. So anytime I try to increment, it's incrementing, right? But then nothing is happening here in this use effect, if you notice. This guy still maintains stats, but then this guy keeps incrementing, and then nothing changes here. But then if I set this number in the dependency array, anytime I click this button and this guy changes, this 1, 2, the use effect is going to run again. And it's going to run the calculation for us and tell us the answer. So let's watch out. So if I come to this dependency array and I insert number as a dependency, now watch what is going to happen. In the first place, number is 15. So it's still going to maintain number as 30 here because it's doing 15 times 2, which is what? 30. But anytime I click on this button and number changes to 16, it will also do number times 2, which is 16 times 2, and then this place will be 32. Right? So let's watch out. Now I click on increment. Can you see? Hello? I hope I'm not confusing you guys. I hope I'm not confusing you guys. So you understand the concept of the dependency array, right? So it's depending on something. Anytime that thing changes, the use effect is going to run again. So what is the use case of this in React? Why do we need this in server-side rendering? In client-side rendering? Why? Why do we need this use effect? Simply because our data are very, very dynamic. Now, a simple explanation from WhatsApp. Notice something on WhatsApp. I don't think that I'm trying to make use of WhatsApp friends as an example to explain this, but that might not be the same way that they handle this. So what do I make use of? But let's just look at it as that scenario. Let's say Facebook worked it that way. So every time you save somebody's number in your phone, right? If you save somebody's number in your phone, and the person is on WhatsApp, as soon as you go to WhatsApp and then type the person's name, you are going to see it automatically, right? At times, you are not going to see it. You have to click on refresh contacts. No, that's actually a server-side thing. So that won't be the perfect explanation for this. Simply because Facebook is just going to the server to pick your information. But then, what is the perfect thing? Yeah, let's just keep going. So if I get a perfect example that will simplify and break this down, I am going to send it over to you guys. And then we'll discuss about it properly. But then for now, that's just how the use effect works. And that's the difference between the use effect and then the use state hook. So biggest advice, I would advise you guys just be making use of this hook for now. Because use effect and use state are like the two most important hooks that you are always going to be making use of. Right? So I want you guys to make use of those two hooks. You don't have to worry about these ones. If you want to worry about useContext, useRef, useReducer, worry you can do it if you feel you can. Your level of learning currently is enough to accommodate you learning those other ones. But for now, the most important of this hook is the use states and use effect. You will keep using it every day of your life as a front-end developer. So understand it properly before you will now head over to all those other hooks and understand how they work, because those other ones are tricky, like the context and the rest. There's a reason why they are making use of them. But then in this case, and in the level that you guys are, continue with these two, use state and use effect. Make sure you master it properly, and you don't have to worry about the rest for now, because you are going to use them, but for now you don't have to worry about them. I know React developers that have never made use of useRef before or useMemo, right? But then all of these ones have their use cases. But then the most important is to learn these two first, then you head over to understand these ones. Because if you learn these two, to understand these other guys is much more easier. So with that, I'm going to skip this just to avoid bunch of confusions and then jump to these custom hooks. And then let's understand what custom hooks are. So initially, I explained how the two use hooks work, use state and use effects. And I told you that React gives you these hooks. It gives you the hook natively from React. Somebody has already written that hook for you, just for you to make use of it, right? But then a lot of times as front-end developers, there are some things that you want to do yourself, because we said that hooks gives you access to like the state lifecycle, etc. That's what hooks are for. So you can choose to have access to state in a custom way using the custom hooks. Now, custom hooks is not rocket science. It's you creating a hook by yourself, writing a hook from scratch, so that you understand what the guy that did use effect and the guy that did use state went through while trying to build it for you. But then let's say you have a way that you want to manage your state and your data customly. You can be able to create your own custom hooks and allow it to handle and manipulate the state for you. So hooks are reusable functions. So we'll be saying hooks since, don't be confused. They are not anything, they are not rocket science, it's nothing different. It's the same functions that you are writing that are still hooks, but then they are reusable. So when you have a component logic that needs to be used by multiple components, we can extract that logic to a custom hook. You get? So custom hook starts with use. So example, use fetch. So you can create a custom hook called use fetch that will help you to be what? Fetching data. So how do you build a hook? So in the following code, we are fetching data in our home component and displaying it. We will use the JSON placeholder service to fetch fake data. This service is great for testing application when there is no existing data. To learn more, check out the JavaScript Fetch API session. But then you guys haven't got into you have done JavaScript now, so it's basically you have done Fetch API. You have tried to fetch data from an API. Example, this guy here, right? So you have tried this guy out, right? Good. Now, so let me get this clear. Everybody has made use of this function, right? Fetch. If you haven't, raise up your hand. You have tried to fetch data from a particular API. Have we done it in this class or in the course of? Yeah, Tally. Let me hear from you. Perfect, perfect. Who else?
Yeah, we did it when discussing promises.
Okay. All right, so let's proceed. So what we are going to do in this class is that we are going to try to create a custom hooks that is going to be fetching data from like multiple APIs for us. So you already know what the fetch does, right? It takes in a URL and then it fetch the resource from that data, and then it then runs the .dem method to change it to a JSON file, and then it's going to set the data, which is a state, so that it can be displayed for you here, right? But to create a custom hook, what we want to do in this case is we want to abstract this out. So anytime a user wants to fetch data from a particular API, he doesn't have to write this guy from scratch. All the person just have to do is create a custom hook and then pass in the different APIs, and then it's going to work. Now, take for example, you are building an e-commerce app like Jumia, and then you created an API that stores all. So you know, Jumia is an e-commerce app that saves like multiple resources. So you go to Jumia, you can see your home appliances, you can see computing devices, you can choose whether you want to buy female wears or male wears at the end of the day, right? So let's make this simple. Jumia might have like different endpoints that give them this data. Take for example, they might have an endpoint that gives them all the available female dresses. So if you click on a female, if you click on the sidebar and then you tell it that you want to maybe go to the female section, the female dresses section, is going to hit that particular endpoint that has the resources to all the female wears, and then it will display it for you. How does it do it? It will do you this way, using this use effects. So when you come to the page the first time, it's going to go and fetch all the details and then display it for you, right? But now what happens if I have different resources? So I might have another resource for, let's say, educational items, or a resource for car spare parts. All of these are different resources, right? What I can do is I can create a custom hook. Instead of repeating this always, writing bunch of use effects to passing a different URL that it will go and fetch the details from me, I can create a custom hook. And then what this custom hook will do is that this custom hook is going to accept a URL as a parameter. And then every time it accepts a URL as a parameter, it's going to run this use effect for you automatically and give you back the response without you having to repeat yourself over and over again. That is the use of the use effect. Sorry, the use fetch, right? Sorry, the custom hooks. So let's address this properly. So what do I do now? Maybe let's try to run this use effect and see the particular data is going to give us. And then we can display it on the front end. Or we try to, yeah. So as this, I have a lot of tabs open. Like close the last one. Okay, it's here. So this is the use effect. And then what this use effect does is that it fetches data from this API, which is basically getting to-dos for us, right? So if I copy this, this should be a GET request because nothing was specified. So if I copy this and paste in the browser, I'm going to see like a JSON file. Can you see? It shows me this file, right? That has bunch of to-dos, have the user ID, have the ID of the to-do, has the title, and then to see whether it's completed, whether it's true or false, right? That works. And everybody understands that.
Can I please come again, please?
Yeah, so you all said you have already worked with APIs. And this is an API that gives us a bunch of to-dos. So this is it. It returns a to-do in a JSON format, has the different to-dos in an object. The to-do has user ID, the ID of the to-do, the title, and then it's completed whether it's true or false. That's just basically what this does. And then this is a GET request, so we can paste it in our browser and see it. But then if we want to access this information from our front end and display it within our app, we are going to use this use fetch guy, right? And then set the data and it's going to display it for us. So back to this. We have data here being set, and then this guy is always going to set data. So what do I do now? So I'll just say console.log data. So maybe we can see it on the front end or on the console. So within our app, let's try to refresh this. I inspect. So this is it, giving me an array of bunch of to do, same thing, right? And then I can choose to display this data in the front end. So how can I display this data in the front end? Is an array. Have you guys done this? Have you guys like tried to render data that you got from an API on the front end? Let me see your hands up if you have done that. Okay, Tali has. Chukobed. This is not a good number. This is not a good number. Just 3 people. No. Then there's a problem because you guys might not understand this concept. Habib, you have something to say or you have tried it too?
Yeah. Are we just talking about using React alone or just fetching data as a whole, like with JavaScript?
Fetching data with JavaScript.
Okay. Well, I've fetched data.
Okay. So
I'm
that's
just not
like
conversant with using React to fetch data.
okay, it's the same way you do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, fetching data from the API using the endpoints, we've done that, and then displaying it on our browser. Yes, you can actually do that by actually calling what you want from the data. Maybe if it's an ID, you can specify an ID. If it is any of the information within the objects of how the data comes, you can display. So we've done that.
Nice. So that means you guys have achieved a lot if you have really done that, right? Because as a front end or as a developer, at the end of the day, it's either you are writing back end code to create this API, or the front end guy is trying to fetch your particular API that has the resource, or is trying to send information. That's just what's happening every day of your life until you get tired. So if you have fetched data and displayed on the front end, congratulations, you are on your way to becoming a very good developer. If you haven't, ensure you do that immediately after this class. Please.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, you can.
I don't know. I don't know. The question might be a little bit different from what you're teaching us today. But please, what's your essence of being a front end developer? Because if I can wrap my head around things, the most things we do is just to create UI, fetch data and display. Let me be like filter add some information, and I don't see any complex calculations or anything at all for project that I've done. Apart from like let's say I'm stepping outside building website to like creating some games, or maybe like um some project on my own that doesn't have to do with website, that I see some calculation. But when it comes to website, I don't see any complex coding. I don't know if I've not gotten to the stage, but then I don't know. Far so good. I don't see anything complex in it.
Mm. Now, I don't want to say anything because a lot of front-end developers will call me out when I speak, right? But then the truth is, I'm a full stack dev, and then let's say you haven't gotten to that stage where things are getting complex yet. But basically, as a front-end dev, those explanations you did are just the simple work that the front-end dev is going to be doing. But the things are going to start getting complex when you are dealing with like different data sets that are robust, or let's say doing some kind of rendering that there's still calculation and logics. The front-end developers don't write like a lot of logic, right? But there's a little bit of logic and calculation in what they do. So that's why for one, I really don't find front-end interesting any longer. And I try as much as possible to run away from doing front-end. Simply because I like the logical part, and logic exists in the back end. So it's just for the front-end developer to pick the logic and then work with it. But then the truth is, don't be discouraged and say, hey, you must not be a back-end developer to handle the logic. In short, the truth is, based on the industry standard currently, front-end developers are even any higher than back-end devs. And then if you ask me, it's much more, there's a lot to do in front-end. That's why I always run away from it. But back-end is direct and easy. Just know the logic and you are good to go. But front end, you are trying to do the UI, you are trying to make it responsive, you are trying to fetch the data, you are trying to do the state of how the data is going to be displayed, like that, etc. So when it gets to integration, when you start doing integration properly, that's like the harder part of front end, or that's where things are going to start getting tricky. So let's just leave it that way. But both ends, to be honest with you, they are not easy.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so let's proceed. So we have successfully used the useEffect to fetch this data, right? Now let's create a custom hook. I don't just want to fetch this. I want to be passing different APIs. So let's say, for example, I have a different API for, let's say, cars. Let me see whether if I change this to cars, it will work. I'm just guessing. Okay, so cars, this is empty, meaning you can't find anything for cars. Yeah, but what will happen is Can someone give me another API?
Check users.
Okay, users. Yeah, so they are users. So we are going to be using users and then to-dos. So these are the different to-dos, right? I can say about 200 of them. And then users, we have like about 10 of them, right? So in the end of the day, we just want to be doing one thing. So in this case, if we want to get users, we have to run like a useEffect that will give us users. If we want to run, if we want to get to-dos, we have to run another useEffect that will give us to-dos. And then we are going to change this data, maybe add something much more different. So we have to be doing this and say, okay, this is data. Then we might say car data. So that first data, we are using it for users. And then this second data, let's say is for to-do. So let's say to-do data. And then let's say set to-do data, right? And then at the end of the day, we're trying to do this. Yeah, so we can just try to do this. Instead of setting it in data, we set it to do data. Yeah, so this will work. So let's console.log to do data also. So now if we go to the console, because we have done like two different use effects, we can be able to see this guy first, which is the users, and then the next guy, which is a to-do, right? Now, anytime we want to fetch a different resource, we have to copy and paste this thing over and over again, change the endpoints that we want to use to show us this data, and then it's tiring. So it's tiring, right? Because as a developer, at the end of the day, you are trying to do what's called dry. So you hear the favorite word that says keep your code dry. So dry simply means do not repeat yourself. So anytime you are writing code and you find yourself repeating yourself as a dev, you are doing the wrong thing, because you simply have to follow the dry method. Do not repeat yourself. So anything that will make you repeat yourself, don't. So in this case, what are we doing here? We are basically repeating ourselves. Can you see that I'm doing the same thing over and over again? So instead of me doing this over and over again, why not just create one hook that is going to handle this? And all I just have to do is that in the hook, I'm going to pass the URL that I want to fetch. So let's try to create our first custom hook. So in React, what you do is you create a folder called hooks. And then we create our first hook. So our hook starts with use. If you notice, useState starts with use. All the hooks that we notice that React gave us always start with use, like useState, useEffect, useContext, useRefs, etc. Right? Likewise, our custom hook. So let's say our hook now is the hook that is going to help us fetch data. So we can just change it to use fetch. So we can just say use fetch.js, and this is going to be our custom hook. How do we now create a custom hook? So a custom hook, like we said initially, is the same thing as the normal JavaScript function that you are writing. Nothing different. Can you see? Right? So let's try to do the use fetch now so you guys can see. So to create this hook is still a normal function, and then we say the name, use fetch, right? So lastly, I will just add what the use fetch is collecting, which is a URL. So if you notice, the only thing that is different between these two stuff here, where is it? The only thing different between these two stuff is just the URL, users and to do. That's just the difference. But every other thing here is the same and similar. So how do we fix this? So I'll do the same thing here. I'll try to set states. So I'll just say const state, and then I'll still repeat data and say set data. I'm going to use states and then make this null. What's on default is null, and then there's nothing in it. So what do I do now? I then run the useEffect in it. Same thing, same whole thing that we did. And then I pass in the dependency array. So now in this useEffect, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to fetch information, right? So let's see. I'm trying to fetch an information, which is what they did here, right? And then they say fetch. So fetch accepts a URL, right? So here I'm going to input the URL and then head over to say .then. So .then is going to so I think res.json. So this is a JSON data. Remember how I explained how the web handles data, right? Did I do it in this class or in another class I'm taking? Is this the way? Let's see. What did I do wrong? Okay, yeah. Res, and then this data guy, we use it to set data, right? So the only thing I didn't do here is to set the URL. Simply because the URL is what changes at the end of the day. So after I set data, I'm going to return data. So let me just return data this way. So what I didn't set here is the URL, simply because if I set the URL here, on default is going to be setting anything I put here in the URL, and that's a problem, right? That's a problem simply because I want to make this dynamic. So the dynamicity comes from the URL. So now next up, what we just try to do is make this URL dynamic. How do I make it dynamic? So inside of this use fetch, I'm adding a URL. So any URL you pass into this use fetch is what is going to get passed in this fetch, and then it's going to go and get the resource and return the data for you at the end of the day. So let's see how to do that in an easy way. So I just pass a URL here, and then I'm good to go. So I think I'm supposed to export use fetch. Yep. So let me export it. Let me export use fetch. So can somebody tell me why we are exporting? Somebody, please.
Sorry, did you say something?
Hello?
Yeah.
So I cannot like over see your screen safe.
Yes, your
But can
screen
others?
is...
Even me, I can't see your screen.
No,
Sir.
generally we can't see your screen, sir.
You guys should have talked. I've been writing code, but my screen is
No,
displaying here.
Just
It's not,
immediately when you just created that
it's not
that
displaying.
custom
Oh.
hook, it's not displaying.
How about now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect. So this is it. So why are we exporting this guy?
Can I answer the question? I should leave it for the
No, no,
students.
no. It's for the students. So
Okay, no problem, no problem. Thank you.
why are we
So
exporting?
basically, the reason why we are exporting it is because we need to be using it in different places. So any place, any company we need to use the fetch use fetch function. We just import it and use it directly there without affecting any other file.
Okay, perfect. So in simpler terms, we are exporting this simply because we want to access this same function or this same hook within different applications. Sorry, within different components of our app. We can be able to make use of it. That's why we are exporting it. So we can have access to it outside of this file. Are we together? All right, so let's proceed. Oh, sorry guys. So let's try out our custom hook now and see how it works. So I've created it. Simply put, I don't have to do like all this bunch of repetitions. And then notice how I'm returning my data. I'm returning it in an array. So if I want to get it, I'll get it in an array, right? So where do we use it? Let's use this in app.jsx, and then let's clean. No, let's not clean any of this. Let's just try to import it. So to import it, I don't have to stress. I will just say use fetch. So it has found it for me. So the same way I'm using useEffect here, useState, that's how I will use it this time around. So I'll just say const data. So the data is what is going to be returned. But then there's already data here. So let me take this one out. So I just say const data equals to use fetch. And then use fetch accepts what? So can you see it has gotten use fetch from us from hooks/use fetch. So use fetch accepts a URL. So here I'm just going to insert a URL. So in this case, I will just come here and copy these first users. Copy and paste this here. And then I take this first use effects. Or let me just take all the use effects out. And also take this guy out. So we notice something. So I also use fetch and then I pass in the URL. So let's see whether the data has been returned for us. So if the data is returned, I should see about 10 users in my console. So back to the console. I think I'm getting an error. Failed to execute JSON as response. Why? Problem should be from inside of my hook. Okay, so this JSON, I'm supposed to call it as a function, but I didn't call it that way. That's why I'm getting that error. But this time around, it should be visible. Yeah, perfect. So as you can see, I get all the 10 users here, and you can see them here. So without any more stress, if I want to get my to-dos now, all I just have to do is come here, and then in this app.gss, I will just change this data. So I can just come here and say const. So custom hook are reusable, right? So let's try to reuse the same use fetch, but this time around is fetching to do data. So I will do to do data. Then I will say equals to use fetch. So this to do data already exists. Let me just comment it. I will just say use fetch. So I'll change the name, use fetch, and then I'll change the placeholder now. I say placeholder, this guy, to something different. So this case, I want to copy to-dos, right? So I change it to to-dos, and then I try to console.log to do data. So I'll console.log all the two of them now. Now let's have a look. Can you see? I can see my 10 users, and I can also get my 200 to-dos. And with that, we have created our first custom and make it reusable. So instead of writing that long code, I just abstracted this down to this guy, pass in the URL, and then it's always going to be fetching the information and displaying for me on the front end. And with this, I can be able to be displaying different data depending on the URL I pass, right? So I'm going to pause here now for questions, because I know a lot of you have. So let me know your concerns. If you understand, let me know. If you don't, I am very happy to come again. So the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You said you'd be happy to come again, sir. Please, can you please come again?
Who is that person?
Rufai.
Rufai. Okay, somebody should tell me what you understand first before I come again for Rufai. Somebody has to pick this. So let me know. Even though you're confused,
it's not as if I didn't pick any. I just want you to come so that I will understand it fully well.
You understand it better. Yeah, I get your point. So, but I need you guys to let me hear different opinions from you, from what you have understood currently, so that my next explanation is going to be based on what you do not understand, right? And based on your confusion. That would be much more easier for me and better to relate back to you guys. So somebody or one or two people should just let me know. I'll be muting my mic now. I'm listening.
Okay. I just understand that you created a custom hook, and how you did it was that you created another folder in which it was hooks, and then inside the folder you created a function which is useFetch function, in which you passed what that use effect was actually doing was what you did. You how would I put it? You use the use fetch now is a function, and then after you did it, you exported it by default and then imported it in our app.js. And now instead of importing, and yes, now we imported it into the app.js and then pass in the URL, and then instead of the URL of users and to-dos. So instead of writing that whole use effect, we now did it in a separate file, exported it, imported it in our main file that we want to render, and then imported the URL, passed in the URL for us to make use of it. So that's a little on what I understood by what you did. Yeah.
Yeah, so another person.
It seems like all of them
Hello.
understood it very well. Only
Hello.
just two people. Can you hear me?
Hello.
I,
Yeah, I want
I
Can
to
you
can
hear
say.
hear
me?
you. Yeah. Habib wants to
I,
help us.
okay, Abib, you can go on.
I don't think I can help. I just wanted to say I understood the idea of what you were trying to do, but how you came about it was something that I don't quite understand. Mainly maybe because of that whole issue where your screen froze, and then again I was being interrupted. Yeah, so I didn't
Yeah,
really
so
quite.
so I really want
I
you
didn't
to
really.
explain to me how. Just explain to me how you understand. It doesn't necessarily have to be how I achieved it technically. Just tell me what you think I was trying to achieve.
Okay. So basically, you create a custom hook where you didn't necessarily where the purpose was you don't want to necessarily repeat the same code over and over and over and over again. So essentially, what you did was you create a new file and you made a function for fetching um, um, API links, and then as an argument for the API link, you posted a URL. Then you exported the content of the content of the created let's say component to the app file, where you then use the code, where you then define the I don't know how to describe that particular aspect, but essentially what you did was you didn't want to reuse the same code, so you just basically made a custom hook. That's the word. A custom hook where you are able to access different data from the same API. So that's basically what I understood, but I don't know if I quite grasp how you did it.
Yeah, I like that. So the most important thing is to understand, and from what you explained, it shows that you knew what I was trying to do. You don't necessarily have to like cram the whole method of how to do it now. On your own personal time, you guys can keep doing it over and over again. That's how it sticks, right? But then I'll come again for the sake of everyone in the class so that we understand properly. So now let me use you guys. You guys should help me explain what are hooks and why do we need hooks? Because I know I've explained this twice. So let's start from there now. What are hooks and why do we need hooks? That's where I will take you guys to custom hooks. But for now, let's explain what are hooks and why we need them. Okay, so let me start again. What is a hook? Hook allows function components to have access to states and other React features. Simple. I won't explain this again. That's just what hooks are. Gives us access, or gives a function component access to states. And it was introduced in React version 16.8 to replace making use of class components. That is why they were brought. So the simple idea of having what is a single page application without state or proper state management. Now we head over to explain different type of hooks. We explain the use states and then the use effects, and then we explain what the use state does. We say it helps us to manage a state, while the use effect, it calls a function based on what is in the dependency array, or it runs a function once, or it runs the use state once, and then that's just how both of them work, right? Use states and then use effects. Use effect is just to track a particular effect within the app and then run the function inside of that hook at a particular time. While use state keeps track of the current state of, let's say, a data or a variable or anything at all within your React application. And then in a nutshell, we said hooks are basically used just to manage React features and also states. That's just why we needed two of them. So that's why in this case, we head over to talk about custom hooks. So we said, while you are trying to manage data, while you are trying to manage React features, while you are trying to use React state, you can, you might want to create your own hook that will try to manage it for you or try to make things easier for you. And that's why the idea of custom hooks came in. Because basically you can't do more than use effects or use states. You are just allowed to do exactly what the developer wants you to do here based on what the person has built or based on what React has built. But then as a front-end dev, you might want to manage your own states and your own data in a custom way within your React application. And that's where the custom hooks come in. So now down to the custom hooks, we went down to try to use the use effects to fetch data from a particular resource. And then that resource is the to-dos resource, which is an API endpoint that goes fetch all of them and then display it for us on the front end. But then we also made an example. We say, we don't just want to view only our to-dos in the front end. We also want to view users, and then users exist in a different resource, right? Or a different URL. So we head over to do what? And then I explained the concept. I said, if we want to get to-dos, we have to run this use effects within our app. After we run this use effect, if we want to get users, we are going to copy and paste this same use effect, change the to-do slash to the resource now to the user's resource, right? So that we can be able to get users. And then I told you guys that that is not a good coding practice, simply because what we are just doing in that case is that we are repeating ourselves. And then I told you about the concept of dry, which means do not repeat yourself. So if I keep copying and pasting this code based on the resource I want to keep changing, it's going to work. But then I am repeating myself, and that's not proper practice. So that's what came about custom hooks. Since all of these are similar, why do we then need to always copy and paste them? Why not let's abstract something different? And then why not let's abstract a particular framework or a template that is going to work the same as all. But then the only thing that will keep changing is maybe, let's say, the URL that we are always going to fetch the information from. And that's what we did here. So I then head over to create this hook, which is the use fetch hook. And then, like I told you guys, every hook starts with use. That's why we have use state, use effect. So if you want to create your own hook, you start it with use. Good. So within this use fetch, you agree with me that the only thing that is changing between the two resources we are fetching from is the URL, right? So that's why we abstracted this out and then created a function that only accepts the URL and runs the same thing that this use effect is doing. So it's just we carrying this use effect, putting it in a function, taking out this URL and passing it as a parameter in the function. So anytime you pass a parameter within that function, the URL which is in the parameter is going to be passed to this fetch. And then this fetch is going to run the same thing that is happening here. It's going to go and fetch the resource for you, change the data back to a JSON format, and then set it as your data and console.log it for you in your app. So basically, that's just what we did to create a custom hook. Back to this. So now I created this function, and then this function, which is useFetch, accepts a URL. And then it's also making use of useState. So it has set up the states here, which is data. And then runs the useEffect. So anytime you call this function, a useEffect is going to run. And what the useEffect is doing is that the useEffect is going to fetch data from the URL that you passed here, change it to a JSON, and then put it in this data, and then return the data for us so that we can be able to input it or insert it in the front end. Basically, that's just what's happening here. Now, back to our app.jss. We exported this code, and then instead of doing those bunch of repetition, we only call this hook, which is useFetch, and then pass a URL to it. And then at the end of the day, it's going to return the response for us, which is either data or to-do data or anything at all. So we can keep adding any different endpoints we have or any different URL we have into the useFetch hook. And it's going to fetch the resource of the data and then display it for us in the front end. So if we want to do this for like 1,000 endpoints, we can do it. And it's still going to work within our app, right? So that's the explanation I have to like break this down for us. So are we satisfied with this explanation? If we are not, the best thing for you to do is just to try this out immediately after the class and keep trying it out. That's the best way for you to understand useFetch. If not, I'll keep explaining and then nobody gets my point. Yeah, hello.
Yes, sir, we are with you now. Maybe we are all of us are doing this thing. The emoji. Yeah, you can't see it.
Oh, okay. I can't see it. I'm like a different page right now. So that's just how custom hook work. So you can use this in different components. It mustn't necessarily have to be inside of this app.jsx. It can be anywhere. You can be able to use this. So let's try to display the data now so we can see it within the app. So what do we do here? we say data. So let me try to map this out. And then with this, I'll say to do. So is it to do I first want to see, right? So I will say I will do a H4. Then I'll do to do.id. So let's see what this looks like. Okay. So as you can see, I can see this to do. Okay, the data is for users, right? So let's say .id. So if it's users now, what is it going to display for me? I'm supposed to get .name. So .name will give me the user's name, right? I think. So can you see these are the users? So user 1 is Lynn Graham, user 2 is Evan Howell, 3 like that. I have it to 10. So how about the to-dos? I can do it the same way. So let's change this to user. So let's try to display another different stuff. So this time around, let's say to do data. So the to do is now the description was inside. Okay, title. So it's title I'm supposed to make use of, not description. Right? So this is it. So we have 200 to do's, same way. And then we have what here? Users, 10 users. And then we have all displayed them on the front end. And without stress, we are able to use the use fetch, which is a custom hook that we created. So give me another endpoint so that let me show you how easy this can be for us to integrate another thing again. So aside user and to do, what else can I find there?
can find post.
I can find what?
Post.
I can't hear you. Post. Okay, no, okay, comment.
Oh,
Nice, nice.
okay.
Comment and post,
Yes.
right? So if I do
I
slash
think
post,
you can find comment only. I don't think you can find this comment. I'm not sure about post.
okay. So let's try to do this now. So now, no stress. I don't have to stress myself. I just have to come and change some stuff here, and I will say post data. So this is the data from the post. Then I will change the URL now. Instead of slash to do, I will say slash posts, right? Or comments, right?
Yes, comment.
Let's try slash comment. So this is comment data. Let me try to console.log comment data and see whether I can see it before I try to render it in the front end. Uh-oh. Yeah, so comments is there. As you can see, there are about 500 comments here, right? It's showing the post ID, the name, blah, blah, blah. The post ID, the email of the person, the name, like that. Okay, so let's try to display this on the front end. Same thing that we did here. All we just have to do is, this is comment data, we copy and paste this code, and then we change it to comments. So anywhere you see comment to do data, you change it to comment data. So let me copy comment data, then paste it, paste this guy, paste this guy. I'll change this to comment, and then copy this guy, change it here to comment, this two, and then I might just change this to posts, or I'll change it to name, because I think I saw name there. All right, so let's try to display this on the front end and see. So can you see? First and foremost, we have users 1 to 10. Or let me separate this so that it's going to be easy for us. So what will happen is I will first do a H4 here and say users. Text 50px. And then after this one, I will say to do. And then after this guy, I will say comments. Yeah. So first and foremost, these are the users. We have users 1 to 10. Next, this is the to do. These are all our to dos that we have, about 200 of them. Then lastly, we are going to be having comments. So these are the different comments we have from about 1 to 500. So that's how you can fetch different data from different endpoints using just one hook. That's the idea of a custom hook. Fetching different data from different endpoints with just one specific hook, instead of you repeating yourself over and over and over again. So with this, I will just stop for questions because I have to run and leave the class. I have a meeting to attend. Then I'm good to go. We are good to go. So you guys can keep trying this at home. So I just changed that to body so that it will make it longer for me. Yeah. And then we're able to fetch stuff on React today. So enough of me. Let me hear from you guys in the next few minutes so that I can set up for my meeting, and then we'll see in the next class. Hello, guys. So there are no questions, or everyone is confused. So we should just go and try to do
With
this
time, they will
ourselves.
not become confused again. With time, they will not be confused again. Once they start practicing it.
Yeah. So once you start using it, once you start doing it yourself, you won't get confused. You're only confused here because you haven't done it. I, for one, was very, very confused like you, but the fact that I kept doing it, I can even do it directly from my head without having to look at anything, right? So no further questions, meaning I can go, right? Perfect. All right, so fine.
Excuse, I do have a question, but it's not necessarily related to the topic. Just like a
Yeah,
general
shoot.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know we are doing front end for now as the web development program, but will we touch on back end at some later date?
To be honest, from the best person to answer this question would be like one of the community guys from FiTech community. But in the curriculum that I saw, I don't think you guys have to do anything with back end, because this course is training you to be a Web3 front end developer. From what I saw in
Oh,
the curriculum, yeah. So
mm,
you will just learn how to get this data, fetch them, and then at the end of the day, you won't even be fetching data from back end again. You will now start fetching data from smart contracts. So I think from this whole week, that's the next thing that you are going to be going into after your graduation. Yeah. So,
okay. Right, thank you, sir.
but then we can't explain how you can fetch data from a smart contract without explaining how to fetch data from a back end. So I don't think within this course you are going to be going through back end. But you within yourself, you can learn back end if you want to. Just pick up any back end language and then try to build your own API, try to fetch it, and trust me, you will understand a lot. Or you guys can try to start a side project where you look for a backend developer that will write code for you, and then you guys will now fetch the API yourselves instead of depending on API that other people have written, right?
All right, sir.
All right,
Thank you.
no problem, boss. All right, guys. So I'll be out of here. I need to set up my meeting. Thank you very much for your time. You guys should keep learning and then keep working hard to understand this concept. And you'll go far, right? So thank you and see you in the next class. Bye.
Okay, no problem, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, guys, that'll be all for the class for today. See you guys during the evening section.
So, please, who is taking us in the evening? Or you are not certain about it?
I'm not yet talking about the line here will be posted on the group chat.
All right, it's cool.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.